All right, so we should be live now. Hope everyone is doing well today. Hey, George and Connor and CJ and Pika Drew, Ekazder, Vumin Dang, and Yusei Booyah. Nice to see all of you guys. Blue Goose Collectibles. If you guys can just let me know if you can hear me and the sound and the video is good, then we can begin. I'm going to pull the stream up. Hey, Winters and Highly Blessed. Hope everyone is having a good week so far. I guess end of your week here on Sunday. So we've got two Patreon questions to go through today before we get into the chat. So if you guys want to start leaving some of your questions, I will go through them in order in the chat as we move along. All right. Okay. So let me pull up the questions. So the first question, it's a little bit of a long one, but it's a really good question. It's something that I think about actually a decent amount, and gets to a deeper point that I try and think about a decent amount in the vintage world, which is it's a question about unlimited cards versus first edition on the in some of the Neo sets. So here's the question. It says, do you think Neo Unlimited sets, particularly Neo Destiny, are more scarce in mint condition than first edition? I know the pop reports reflect this with certain cards, but wanted to get your opinion. For example, the Neo Destiny Unlimited Light Togetic has a PSA 10 pop of 6, while the first edition pop is 33. I would assume there are more unlimited copies out in the wild, but I've always found this discrepancy to be interesting as it occurs with a multitude of cards in the Neo era. I think it could either be a lack of desire to grade these unlimited cards for so many years that cause their pops to lag, or there are truly a lower amount of them. Could also be a mix of the two or other factors I'm not considering, like collectors obtaining the first edition cards upon release to keep in mint condition, and the majority of the unlimited cards being purchased by kids who played with them. However, the one data point that contradicts my thoughts are the pops of the Neo Destiny Shining cards. I'm curious about your take, if you have any info related to this. Yeah, so you literally, phenomenal question. You literally touched on really all of the key points. The last one is actually the really smart point, is to look at the Shinings, because the Shinings had, to go to your earlier point in the question, the Shinings had were always valuable enough to grade, and so they always got graded and always got taken out of the binders, and a lot got graded. So I think it's a combination. Just kind of like you implied there, or said, or asked if it might be a combination. This is an area that I think I got wrong. Interestingly, on one of Top 10 Pokemon's video, great channel, I love what he does in terms of just like the quality and kind of straight to the point, and giving just like useful info every week on what cards are now valued at, or what they're selling at. On one of his videos, he made a purchase of an unlimited set, PSA 10 unlimited. I think it was like maybe a bunch of Neo Destiny cards, and I commented that I thought that I wasn't sure if unlimited was a good purchase, and that I thought that it made more sense that at the time the PSA 9 first editions were selling for less, and quite a bit less than some of the PSA 10 Unlimited. And I posited that I thought maybe that the first edition PSA 9s should be worth more than the PSA 10 Unlimited cards. And at that point, I actually thought that more Unlimited would be graded by now, because I didn't think that they were as scarce or as rare as they seem to be. And talking to people, like, people just don't have them. They don't see them. Not a lot more are being sent in, particularly from like a Neo Destiny set, as you said. I'm not sure what it's going to look like over time. I would expect that more Unlimited gets graded and more new 10s and 9s come into the pop, but I don't have any. Just to be completely transparent, I don't have a big hoard of those where I have a bunch of these other cards that I'm still sending in from a lot of these other sets. So, and I looked for them for years. So it's not like I was trying to buy them and complete binders and these sorts of things and have extras, and it just was so difficult to always find those. It's part of why I talk so much about the Neos and about the value that I see in the Neos. And I think this is an area where I really got it wrong in my assessment back when I made that comment on Top 10's video. I think that was an excellent purchase he made with hindsight, and I think those 10s may have been undervalued, and in part because I know that there are a lot of 10 collectors who are trying to complete all of those sets in Unlimited, and there just may not be enough that some of those 10s, like, I'm hearing humongous offers behind the scenes for some of like those Unlimited 10s where there's only like 6 in the pop, these types of things. So really interesting question. I think you're right on the money. It could be a situation where it's like a bit more like Japanese, where they, because the print, because the demand was so much lower at that period in Pokemon, they printed a whole first edition printing, right, like a normal size first edition printing, we could say, and then they realized that they didn't need to print that much more, or as much as they usually would for Jungle, Fossil, and Rocket when there was so much more popularity. Similar to what they did on the Japanese side when they added that Japanese first edition for the E-Series, which was a low pop time, and so it might be, and the early Nintendo EX era. So it might be the same thing happened here. Now, I think the difference is that the first edition stamp in English, I think, is more valuable than the first edition Japanese stamp, because I think it connects. That first edition English stamp connects so much and connects to value for so many of us, and we prefer the first edition stamp. And of course, there are not a lot of first edition, PSA 9 and PSA 10s of any of those Neo cards also. So I don't think it's quite the same as how I would value those Japanese evaluation. But if we compare that to like base set, where I think base set first edition is so much rarer than base set and some of these other sets, I think it's a really underknown point. And I think there's probably still room to take advantage of it. Although back when Top 10 was like buying that, he was really taking advantage of it, I think. And he still paid a lot for those cards at that time. He paid very much full price, on the market, but that it was a really good buy, because I think that a lot of the market didn't really know that, and so I think undervalued those Unlimited cards. And of course, there's the same amazing and awesome art, but I do think that those pop reports will go up, and I think looking at the shinings is exactly my instinct. How can we try to measure this? We have to look at the shinings and see how many shinings there are, because those are most likely going to be the most filled out. We have to look at those, and we have to look at like in Neo Genesis, we can look at the Lugia, looking at the big cards, maybe the Dark Espeon, to see how many get graded from each set. Fantastic question. And you nailed all the key points yourself. Hey Jake, what do you think about the longevity / value of non-TCG cards? People are becoming more familiar with Cardass and Topps soon, but what about others like movie promos, phone cards, etc.? Yeah, it's a great question. So I think about the non-TCG cards like this. The fact that they're non-TCG, I do think hurts their collector value, because I think you're going to have certain people who only collect the TCG cards, and you probably are going to have certain people who only collect the non-TCG cards, but you're going to have many less people who collect just the non-TCG cards than just collect the TCG cards. So that's going to hurt their demand a little bit. But what's going to be really important in terms of figuring out where the demand is the coolness of the art, which is subjective, but I think you can get a sense from talking to people what most people like. Okay, but then you also have to be careful not to listen to hype and really judge some of that value for yourself in terms of how good looking the card is or how much it stands out. And then we're talking about like the history, the age. So how old is it? For example, Top Zone being maybe the first cards, or Bandai 1996 maybe being the first cards, or whatever it is. That gives it a story, right, to it that creates a certain premium, added premium. Whereas like the 2000 Magi cards or the 1999 Magi cards, although I think that they're really cool looking and I like the release and I like that they came in a box of chocolate and they're from Japan and I think that's interesting. It's not before the TCG came out. It's not the first appearances of these cards. So I think that is going to decrease the overall historicness and decrease sort of the potential of like exponential crazy growth in the future, or the exponential crazy growth, frankly, we've seen in the short term on something like a Top Zone card. But that doesn't mean that there isn't value for those things. A lot of it will also have to do with like how many of these things there are and the order in which people get interested in them. So first Top Zone in 1997, Cardass in 1996, Bandai really started to move. Once those started to move, things started coming out like those playing cards that became very valuable. The Magi cards went up. So usually it starts with sort of the most historic, most significant, best looking thing. And then if there's enough demand and popularity in that to move the prices up on those, it then has a trickle down effect where it moves up the prices on similar items that just aren't quite as good, but similar in terms of being non-TCG, Japanese, that sort of thing. So it's a great question. I think that it's about how much money is left to be put into these sorts of things. Like if you're starting to buy into cards that aren't even graded by PSA, which a lot of these aren't graded, but maybe are graded by BGS, I think it's very important that they can be graded, because clearly, at least for the time being, anything that can be graded not only adds a legitimacy to it, but it adds quite a bit of value because people like to have it in that holder, and it adds that rarity element of being able to get it in great condition. So I think that those points are key too, that it can actually be graded when you look at some of these things. But yeah, I'm watching some of these cards closely. I'm nibbling at some things, both in Pokemon and in Dragon Ball Z and other places. I think that there's interesting potential and opportunity. I think it's about trying to figure out as much information as you possibly can about those cards. So when you see a really cool looking non-TCG card, trying to figure out, okay, how much of this was made? Why has it always not been valuable? Why don't people like it? Are there good reasons for that? Are there not good reasons? And really going through that process. But it's a great question. All right, so 2 excellent questions from the Patreon members. So thank you for those. Hopefully they were helpful for everyone. Now let's jump into the chat. All right. Let's see. eCaster says, "Hey Jake." That's the second question. Let me get to that in 1 second. I'm sorry, I missed a couple questions. Okay, Connor B says, "Hey Jake, love your interview with Speed. Y'all touched on some great topics." Yeah, it was great talking to Speed. I think he's a really nice guy. I really love his energy, his channel. I think it's great that like people from different generations love Pokemon. I think it's really important to listen to what 20-year-olds are thinking and talking about, what they like, what they don't like, both from that investor perspective, trying to figure out what the future is going to look like, because these guys are going to have more and more money, more and more capital to spend on things, but also just from a community perspective. It's fun being part of a hobby that is enjoyable and appreciated by multiple generations and kids, and so that families can appreciate together across the age span. I think it's part of what made it so enjoyable in the first place, and I think is what is going to help keep the hobby so healthy and fun. So I love hearing their perspectives. Gonna try and get more people on like that. That was certainly the goal. So I'm glad you guys liked it. I also think it's fine. Like one thing I want to say, because I did see a couple like negative comments on the last video when I looked today. Um, I think it's important for people to hear other people's perspectives and be able to understand that people view these things differently, and to not shame or put down either me for my perspective and my hard work and what I'm trying to do, or someone like Speed, who he and I agree on a lot of things, but maybe disagree on some other things. He's a really smart guy who really enjoys Pokemon and is doing everything he can to like learn about flipping and enjoying the process. So I think that you can get a lot more from listening to people's arguments and really considering them, and then deciding that you don't agree with them and moving on, rather than being upset that they have arguments that you disagree with. Like that's just gonna always happen. All right. CJ Dwork says, "Hey Jake, excited as always for today's chat. Thoughts on the new English set named Chilling Rain? Sounds cool to me." What are my thoughts? I think I like didn't like it. I'm not exactly sure why though. Maybe because I like, and funny enough, I think we talked about this a little bit in like Sagar's stream last night, but it just like, I would like some like warm, nice weather, and we're kind of going into like spring hopefully, and they're putting out like a chilling a Frozen set. But I do love Frozen. I love ice Pokemon and ice moves, so definitely looking forward to the set. It'd be cool to see some other Pokemon featured. We'll see if they throw in like an ice Charizard first ever or something. I'm sure they won't, I'm just joking, but it is nice to have sets that don't feature Charizard sometimes, and it also can make them more affordable and more easy to find and open, which can be more fun for people who just like to open and collect and are a little more casual. And I'm a little more casual with Modern, so it's nice to just have sets that hopefully they'll print enough, and it won't be too popular that we can all get some and kind of open it up and enjoy it and be more laid back about it. I really like sets like Vivid Voltage that don't necessarily have like, I guess the way to put it is they don't just have like one or two huge chase cards and you're just kind of ripping through packs looking for those. It's fun opening sets that can be fun too, but I think in general it's more relaxing to open up sets where you're going to get a couple 3 or 4 cool cards. Like if you open up a box of Vivid Voltage, you're going to get some really cool amazing rares. You're going to get some probably some cool holos and maybe a rainbow rare and a full art trainer. There are a bunch of cards that you'll be really happy to pull and add to your collection versus opening a set like Champion's Path, which I don't think is such a bad set or anything. I know people really, really hate on Champion's Path. It's like, it's fine. It certainly wasn't a good set, but it had, some cool cards in it, some cards I liked. I liked the Gardevoir VMAX from that set. I liked the Rainbow Rare Trainer I liked. So there were other cards I liked from that set. It just was so repetitive, right? Because it was such a small set that you would just like pull those over and over again, and the only real high value then were for the Charizards, and even they didn't retain that much value because there was a lot of it being opened, and there's still a lot of it on the shelves, these types of things. So, but yeah, it should be cool to see that set. CJ Pikachu says, "Hey Jake, recently changed my YouTube name from Andrew M. Hope you're doing well. Looking forward to today's chat." Hey. Pikachu, thanks for being here today. Connor B says, "Jake, I would love for you to discuss if you feel that the current money-focused nature of the hobby is exhausting you, burning you out, taking away some of the joy of collecting, etc." Yeah, I actually made a video that I never released on this subject about a month and a half ago, just saying that I think we need to be careful as a hobby how we treat each other and discuss money and discuss scalping and this idea that like people that I think that there's demonizing scalpers, which is very unfair, as like these horrible people, and then demonizing the people buying at higher rates. There's just a lot of like anger and frustration, and I think rather than being upset at people outside of the people who are really scamming I think it's just more of an upsetting situation because we're all in this pandemic and we're frustrated, and probably people are depending more on a hobby like this than they normally would for fun. And if they have kids, their kids probably really want these things. And children's childhoods are really sacred, important times. And I think paying extra for your kid to experience something important during a critical age or a critical period of their life, I think I really empathize with that predicament for parents. And so I think that stuff's really frustrating. But for me, the frustrating part was why wasn't the Pokemon Company printing more product, and also for me, the frustration was a lot of people hyping it up, and I thought manipulating the prices higher, and I still see it all the time. I go on channels all the time, not a lot, but certain streamers, certain things that are just like, Modern should be 3 times more expensive, 4 times more expensive, 5 times more, just arbitrarily pushing up prices all the time and trying to keep that heat up while selling to their audiences the whole time. And like that stuff, like that is that is really, really toxic for this hobby. I promise you. People are going to get horribly burned by that behavior. It's a lose-lose for everyone except for the person who's selling immediately and everything. So, but going to your question, and part of that video was going to be these feelings of my personal exhaustion of running a finance channel where I talked about money and investing so much, and particularly because I feel like there's been I feel like I've tried to be sort of a voice of like let's be careful this year. Let's take a deep breath. Let's try and collect what you love, and if you're going to invest, be really thoughtful and not just throw lots of money into things for fear of missing out, these types of things, because that's how you really lose a lot of money in investing. And so making a lot of those videos and just having those constant debates and fights and feeling like I was one of the only people doing that, kind of pushing against all of that, that burned me out a lot a few months ago. I was really tired. And so for me, like the way that I responded to that was I made less videos, and I also just spent more time enjoying collecting. Because before I did this, it was really fun just being like a secret collector I just collected for myself. I never had an Instagram. I never had an interest in having an Instagram. I wasn't buying these cards to show them off or to get attention or praise. It was really fun trying to track down and chase down things that there are so few of them in the world. I loved the challenge. I loved rediscovering my childhood. Like all the things I loved about collecting, I've been trying to really focus on and make sure that I'm still doing and engaging in. I think it's part of why I've gotten into Dragon Ball Z. Certainly, I see it as really awesome, potential investment potential, but it's extremely risky, like everything else. But I also saw it as a really unestablished market where I could be the first to market in a lot of ways on a lot of these cards, or very early to the market. Within the first, 10 to 15 big collectors who had a lot of money, who could really try and do some very difficult things, which was try and complete gradable sets of like limited and unlimited like ultra rare cards, for those who know like the score sets, these types of things. So, and get as many of the boxes as possible. And that was sort of that love of collecting. And so I think for everyone out there, I think that and to your question here, Connor, and point of taking some time away to enjoy collecting, if you're a YouTuber, there's an exhaustion of being a YouTuber and a content creator, because I feel an obligation to say useful things all the time, right, and to push myself to make useful content that you guys are going to like and enjoy, that's going to help you, that you're going to either find entertaining or is going to help you make good decisions. So that's tiring, and then all of the fighting is tiring, and then all of the money can be tiring. So for content creators, and then for people who are just collecting, watching one investment video after another can be frustrating and tiring. I think it's why a channel like Sagar is so great, and I think it's why a lot of us YouTubers go hang out there, because we can just like hang out, we can joke around. I'm so much more like laid back and chill there. I'm just like being sarcastic and joking around and hanging out. Whereas on this channel, I feel a responsibility to say useful things, all the time, and be very careful with my words and targeted with my words, that sort of thing. So, and for people who don't have YouTube channels, I think it's a similar thing can very much apply, just in terms of taking breaks, don't watch channels like my channel, take breaks from my channel if it's burning you out, or hearing so much of the money financial analysis is making you not enjoy your cards as much. Take a break from watching the channel. Take a break from Pokemon in general, I think, is always good. Do other collectibles or other hobbies that get you outside your house. Particularly if you're struggling with the financial part and maybe you're spending too much. I know I spend too much all the time, and I really try and keep myself in a budget, but sometimes these deals come up and it can just be so addicting to buy and make those improvements on your collection. So I think that there's a lot of fun to be had in that, but it can also burn you out without that balance. So it's a great question, Connor. Ecaster says, "Hey Jake, what is your favorite binder project? Either one you've completed or one you're working on." Let's see. So the one that I'm working on right now actually isn't Pokemon. I'm working on Dragon Ball Z right now. And what I'm working on, it's a little hard to show it. And I still have a long way to go, but I can show you guys some of the pages. What I'm working on is I'm trying to complete... terrible. Whatever, you guys can see the cards a little bit. I'm trying to complete limited, unlimited, and GKI versions of all of the ultra rares, and limited and unlimited versions of every foil personality in Score DBZ and in the Score GT. And it's really challenging. These cards are much rarer and harder to find than anything in Pokemon. And it's really been incredibly fun. In terms of Pokemon, my binders are mostly completed, although I have to actually recomplete them because I've been pulling cards out and grading them, because the value is so high on some of these cards that I want to get them slabbed so that they can protect the condition, and I possibly will sell some of them and then replace them with lower cards, lower graded cards. So I will actually go back, I think, soon, particularly once I make more progress on my DBZ goals, which is where all my money is going to right now. I'll probably go back and try to recomplete. Like, I pulled some of my Expedition cards out. I love my E-Series binders. Huge fan of those. I pulled some of the reverse hollows out. I pulled some of my base cards out. What else? Yeah, some of my first edition set. I pulled out some of my base set first edition cards to send those in and get graded. So that's the thing. I pulled out some of my Top Zone cards and some of my Cardass cards to get graded as well. So all of those sets that were once complete or mostly complete are now missing a few key cards that I hopefully will get back eventually. But I'm going to be very patient with those, and I'm going to try and get those at like a really good deal. And I'm going to try and get some fairly beat up binder cards. But yeah, binders are the best. I love making binders. Doing these DBZ binders where I'm trying to find like foil. And I'm completing each set in limited as well, in all foil, which is a huge task. And it's so difficult to find all these cards, and it's so fun. I love the chase and the challenge. I'm just having an absolute blast, like talking to people all across the world trying to find these cards. So I see we have about 140 people watching right now. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you can take a moment just to like the video, if you like what you're hearing, just to support the channel, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe. That would be super helpful as we kind of jump into more questions. All right, next question. Vumin Dang says, "Hey, it's almost 3 a.m. here, but I really want to catch the stream today." Thank you so much for joining us, and I understand the feeling. I'm up super late night sometimes watching Sagar stream, and I'm like, I really should get some bed for my mental health, but it's fun to be on the lives, I think, and fun to be part of the community and interact with the same people every week. So I totally get that feeling. Pikachu says, "Jake, what are your thoughts regarding cards like Neogen, Lugia, and T17, both unlimited, going for 400 to 600 a PSA 8, despite the pop being mind-bogglingly high? Artificial PSA scarcity or new norm?" So It's tough. It's really tough to know what's going to happen with these cards. You know, is the Lugia going to become more and more valuable and more seen as similar to the Charizard? And if so, like if we think about it right now, like the base set Unlimited Charizard, which there are so many more in the world of, in my opinion, than the base set Lugia card. If we compare those prices, the base set Charizard in an 8, what is that going for? Over certainly over 1,000 again, right? I'm not sure what the 9 is now. I know the 9 came all the way down to about 1,500 to 1,700. It's probably like 22, 23, 20, 2,000, I mean. So if we think that the 8's maybe half of that, roughly half of that, we think it's like 1,000 to 1,500 maybe right now, somewhere in there. Unless prices have changed. They're always changing all the time. So that's the type of market we're in. They could have dipped this week and I wouldn't have known. I'd have to look it up type of thing. But if they've held at the last time I looked, maybe 2 weeks ago, and we think that the Lugia is only going for 400 to 600, so it's going for like half the price of the Charizard, you have to think, what makes sense? Is the Charizard too high? Is the Lugia too low? Is the Lugia too high because it shouldn't be that close to the Charizard? All of this stuff is super subjective. In terms of the demand side. The supply side, though, I think I'm pretty confident that there's a lot less of that Lugia. So over time, if more Gen 2 people who prefer Gen 2 to Gen 1, who prefer Lugia to Charizard, for example, get more and more into the hobby, have more disposable income, will that gap narrow? Will it not narrow? It's sort of anyone's guess. But I think that trying to think more critically that way and comparing these things and understanding that old prices don't necessarily matter, because the hobby's so young and because the market is dramatically different than it was a year ago. And the people in this market, and part of that video with Speed was to try and illustrate this, the people in this market right now are dramatically different than who the people were a year ago. It's like 90% new people, and a lot of those people are younger, okay? So that's where I think that some of the older thinking and getting stuck in those old, not necessarily old price points, because I think the old price points are important to think about, but in terms of the relative price points is really important to think about. That some things that where there really wasn't a market for, now there is a market because more of those Pokemon fans are coming in. So the negative to that and the pro sort of Gen 1 argument is that there's so many more Gen 1 fans because that's when the Pokemania happened. That's what everyone's favorite were, and even people who came in Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4 still like Gen 1 a lot, that type of thing. So we'll have to see how that plays out over time. In terms of the last part of your question, though, is it like artificial PSA scarcity or the new norm? I don't know. I don't know how many of those types of cards are at PSA. Definitely quite a bit, I would say. But I think that there are a lot more unlimited Charizards at PSA than there are unlimited Lugias. I would be pretty surprised if that wasn't the case. And I think if you look at the rate at which these cards are being graded, the unlimited Charizards are being graded like crazy still. It's shooting up. And the Lugia is probably going up quite a bit, but maybe not as much, not as significantly. So that's the type of things that I'd be thinking about. What you're always trying to do is you're always trying to predict the future in investing and predict that supply side and then predict that demand side. Okay? George Bott says, "Hi, Jake. Without reference to a particular card or set, which do you think are stronger, Gen 1 birds or Gen 2 dogs? For some reason, I think Gen 2 seems more popular, perhaps depicted as more elusive." I don't think Gen 2, the dogs are more popular than the birds. I think that I think it's who you ask, right? I think that most Gen 1ers love the birds, and I think a lot of other people maybe prefer the dogs, or it's similar, but people love the Gen 1 birds too. So from the people who I talk to, I think, again, it goes to kind of the circles that you're in. It's part of why it's so great to get out of those circles. Part of why I'm enjoying Clubhouse, because I'm hanging out with I'm hanging out with people in their 40s, I'm hanging out with people in their 20s, hearing what they really think firsthand about these things. It provides me a broader ability to have a broader analysis than I think that it's so easy, and I've been saying this at the beginning of the channel, it's so easy to be in your bubble of analysis without really understanding the hugeness of the Pokemon market and that there are so many people who think differently than you. All right. We're making some progress. I know I take so long on every question. I try and answer every question like extremely fully, but I know that in doing so, it can be take a long time to get through questions. Oh, so I see that there was a super chat from Derek Pierre Luis, and I apologize that I missed it before. He asks, what's your thoughts on Gen 2 pre-final evolution starters like Cyndaquil, Croconaw, etc.? All of their PSA 10s for those starters are under Pop 10. So I imagine you're talking about like the first edition English cards from like Neo Gen, for example. Because like that's where the first appearances of those Pokemon were. Yeah, I think that they're great, to be completely honest. How great, like I think that they are way undervalued compared to base set first edition. And the prices on the commons and uncommons in base set first edition and the stars in base set first edition. Now, there are going to be quite a bit more of them, and I think that certainly there are more going in now. Part of the reason they were never sent in was because those Neo sets are incredibly scarce, and people just don't have a lot of those cards. But the other main reason is because there was no value to them. And so those pop reports are way lower than they actually will be one day. Now, where will they get? I can see Jungle and Fossil, common uncommons, getting to 5,000 to 10,000 in the pop very, very easily. Not PSA 10, but in the pop total. I can see a card like that, probably more in that, easily into that sort of like, 2,000 to 3,000 range. And again, it's pretty wild speculation by me, but that's just like what my instinct for what it's worth, and we shouldn't trust our instincts too much. But if I had to throw it out, I could see it really, really growing, particularly if those cards ever gain in value, because then once the cards go up in value, then you see people sending in 8s and 7s and 6s. And once you get those 8s and 7s and 6s sent in, and if the 6s and 7s can be worth like $25 to $50, that's when you can see those 10s going up to that 1,000, 1,500, kind of like what base set first edition did with like the Charmander, and those cards went above 2,000. But so that's the type of thing we're looking for, is if those PSA 10s can get to those $1,000 price points one day, because people start talking more about Gen 2, they realize that there just aren't going to be that many PSA 10s. They realize that there are less than base set first edition potentially. So that's the type of stuff that I'd be thinking about. I think that those have been slept on forever. And a lot more slept. Like the Team Rocket common and uncommon first editions are way insanely overvalued as compared to those. Like the fact that I was buying like the PSA 10's first edition common and uncommons from some of these sets. I didn't buy any. I have like no Rocket at all, because I looked at those Rocket prices, like $300 for that Rocket Squirtle. There's so many of those Squirtles and Charmanders, and even though I think those cards are great looking, those are not the same card as those first appearance Gen 2 Pokemon cards that are the first appearance of a Pokemon, and are, there's just going to be much less of them. So, it's a great question. I don't have nearly, I'm not even close to completing those sets in PSA 10 first edition. I wish I had them. That's how hard it's been to find them, and I've been trying to buy them for years. So, it will be easier to find them, but the prices will probably be higher going forward. But the caveat with that is that if you buy in too early or too quickly, what can happen is you can catch it on the wave of when a lot of cards are coming out, and then if you're the first one to buy it, and then 10 to 15 to 50 to 100 more hit the market, the prices will probably retrace initially, and then I think in the long run will come back up, if that makes sense. And I think that's part of what happened to a lot of people who bought the Eevee first edition or some of those jungle cards. is that they bought sort of that first wave of new ones that were hitting the market, not realizing that a lot more were about to hit the market because they were a lot more common than the pop reports express. So trying to time that is really challenging, but just understanding, don't be alarmed if you buy and then it retraces, at least in the short term. Now, a lot of that will be dependent on Pokemon's overall popularity and demand, and the fact that this amount of money stays in the hobby. If we see retraces across the board on cards, significant retraces across the board, you're certainly going to see a significant retrace on those cards as well. So they are not immune. Okay, hopefully that is helpful. GeorgeBot says, "Hi Jake. Without reference to a particular card or set, which do you think are..." Oh, you already asked that. Sorry, I already read that. Seeing a lot of familiar faces here. Thank you all for joining today. Really, really appreciate it. Glad we have a great group coming each week. Dylan Westra saying, "First time that they've made it to the live chat instead of listening to the recording. Glad you're able to make it. Hopefully it's a better experience hanging out live and being able to ask questions and talk with other people here." Michael Shart says, "Hey Jake, just curious, with the stimulus checks coming, where do you think the biggest impact on prices will be, if any? Vintage graded, modern graded, vintage sealed, modern sealed, etc." So the thing about investing, and I know I repeat this a lot on the channel, but it's something that just I need to drill in there because I think that it's one of the most common mistakes people make, is that when some news is announced, it immediately gets priced into the market. And it's part of why I predicted that, months ago when Logan Paul made the announcement that he was going to do that he was still in Pokemon and was going to do a box break, I thought that just his announcement would have the most effect on the market, not actually doing the box break, because that news that he was still in Pokemon would get spread out around and would make everyone feel more confident and comfortable. It's the same thing with these stimulus checks. As soon as they announced that these stimulus checks were going to happen, everyone thought, okay, Pokemon's going to go up, and or at least Pokemon is going to remain stable, and so people are going to get more stingy, not want to sell, right? The other thing is that people often spend on credit before they get their stimulus check, is another thing to think about. So there are a lot of people who've already spent the money that they have coming to them, and they're going to use that stimulus check to then pay that off. Okay, so those are 2 points. Now, I do think that there are going to be a number of people who don't do that and are maybe waiting for the stimulus money and are going to spend the stimulus money, and that will have an effect and raise prices. But I think that a lot of what's going on isn't about the stimulus checks and the actual money from the stimulus checks, although I think those do have a significant effect. I think a lot of it is just the confidence. Like the stimulus checks, it's logical and repeatable that because we're getting stimulus checks, everything is going to go up, and then everyone thinks, okay, I'm not going to sell, I'm going to hold and wait for the stimulus checks, so I'm going to make more money. Same thing around the second Logan Paul event. What can happen is there can actually be retraces after positive events. There can be retraces, and it's the same thing with the Logan Paul event. So try to understand this psychology, because it's a little bit complex, but the psychology is everyone predicts that, let's use the Logan Paul event because it's the easiest. Everyone predicts that the Logan Paul event is going to raise prices on Pokemon. So the prices go up, right? Because everyone has predicted that, and they go up for the future, right? With that future thinking I was describing. Then when the Logan Paul event happens, prices actually don't go up anymore because the fact that Logan Paul was having that event has already been priced into the market. And so then what happens is people say a new narrative is created that, oh, it must have not been that good, and people didn't like it that much, and it didn't. And that's why it didn't have the effect. And the fact that it didn't have an effect actually makes me more worried about Pokemon, and then there's a sell-off. So that's how good news, the reporting of good news or the reporting of bullish news very early can actually cause bearishness later on and retraces later on. We see this all the time in the stock market. And it's the same thing with markets like this and collectible markets like this. So it's very important to analyze on a deeper level than just that sort of initial analysis of Logan Paul good, or stimulus check good? Yes, but how, and what's the timing of that, and how to best predict that and maneuver around it. Okay. So, but at the same time, I do think that there will be, as I said, some probably increase, just because people will actually have. There will be a certain amount of people who didn't buy in credit and will have the cash and might be spending a little bit more. Pikachu said, also in. Joshua Epstein says, hey Jake, new to the channel, thoughts on the longevity of the green Charizard 97 Cardass vending prism PSA 10, and difference at all between the red and green front? Red demands more value. I don't have too much to offer on that. I'm not sure. You'd have to like look at the pop reports. I'm not the biggest fan of those, just because of the way they look. I believe you're talking. So the green and red one I'm thinking of is actually the 96. So I might be thinking of a different card than you're thinking, Joshua. I'm sorry. And I'm thinking of the Bandai cards. The 96, where they're prism cards and one is green and one is red, type of thing. So, because the Monster Cardass cards are different. But in terms of the 97 Cardass vending prism, and maybe I'm missing something here, I'm wrong about something here, but the 97 Cardass vending prism card, I love those. They're some of my very favorite cards in the hobby. I think they're tremendous looking. I love the prism look. I love the art in all those cards. I love the non-prism ones, just the common uncommons we could call them, or the non-prism cards. Yeah. Immediately when I saw that set, I knew I would be collecting all of that, and I didn't care if they were ever worth anything to anyone else, and I wanted to own all of them. So when you feel that about a set, that's a good sign. That other people might feel that too, and it could be quite valuable. Super Glitch says, can you expand on your hesitation with sending cards to CGC? I've heard you say in a few other videos you're wanting to see what happens. Curious as to what you mean by that. Yeah, so the main issue with CGC is that the 9.5s, it's easier to get a PSA, much easier to get a PSA 10 than to get a CGC 10, and the 9.5s are selling well below the PSA 10 so far in CGC, and a lot of the CGC 9.5s are probably cross-gradable to 10s. So I think when you send in cards to CGC, and a lot of them, or most of the PSA 10 cards, are actually going to just come back 9.5s, you're losing a lot of money, at least in the short term if you're looking to flip and sell quickly. It's just the reality of the market right now. Will that shift and change over time? We'll have to see. So that's one issue. The other issue is that CGC is just a lot newer, and it doesn't have there are a lot of people and influencers who are credible, who are talking very positively about CGC right now, which is going to help the brand, and because branding is very important. It's really making a push right now to be branded as at least the number 2, if not on par with PSA, whereas BGS forever was sort of the number 2. And for me, what being careful is just, I don't know how all that's going to shake out, how the arguments are going to shake out, how the market is going to accept all of this at the end of the day. And so when you're sending a massive amount of cards to CGC and you're spending a lot of money on the grading fees, you are taking a real risk, because you could be losing tens of thousands of dollars depending on the cards you're sending in, or more. Okay? Because if you get back a lot of 9.5s that would have been 10s at PSA, you literally could be losing easily tens of thousands. I mean, obviously it depends on the cards. You could be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially if you look to sell them. So at least right now in this market. And I just don't think there's a lot of upside on CGC right now in terms of that. It's not because now I think the lower, so I'm not sure how CGC is grading lower graded cards, but for example, BGS, it's so easy to get BGS 8s. Like, BGS 8s can be absolute garbage, whereas generally PSA 8s are pretty nice. So there can be value, depending on how CGC is grading right now, in sending some of the worst cards to a place like CGC, because they will get 7s and 8s, whereas if you send them to PSA, they'd get like 4s and 5s. So, or 6s. So, but at the top end, and again, that's really from Beckett. I'm not saying CGC is like that, because I don't have any experience grading with CGC. I don't have a lot of experience looking at CGC cards. I think it's way too new. I like that people are happy about it and are saying positive things and that they're grading really difficultly, and fairly, and that it seems to be very, not difficultly, but that they're grading fairly and they're grading consistently is kind of even the more important thing. But I'm also wondering what it's going to look like now that the lines are getting longer there. Are they going to raise the prices, one? And two, if they don't raise the prices, are they going to just have the same issues as PSA, where they get overwhelmed with supply and they start making more mistakes? So there's just a lot that if anyone is being honest, will say there's a lot of risk sending to CGC. There's a lot of risk right now sending to PSA. When you have two grading companies competing for some sort of superiority and for our attention and for what should be graded and what should be the most valuable, that creates a lot of risk. Okay? So, and anyone who's telling you otherwise, I think, is not giving you the full picture from my perspective and opinion, whether they're very pro CGC or very pro PSA. Alex Ryan says, "Hey Jake, in reference to last week's point about Shadowless, I found that some Jungle No Symbol holos have significantly less PSA 10 than First Edition. Do you think these no symbols are undervalued?" Yeah, so Jungle No Symbol, some people absolutely love Jungle No Symbol. Gem and Pokemon, for one, Zach loves them. There are a lot of people who don't really care that much about it. It's one of these errors, we could call it, that there certainly aren't that many of them, but there's still quite a bit, and it depends on the demand for them. You know, do you want to know? You know, I think the First Edition stamp has so much meaning to us as collectors, and I'm just not sure that that a no stamp has the same type of meaning. But for some people, it really does. I could see those exploding in value if they get hot. Like, those are the types of things, if they got hyped by influencers and everyone started saying, like, that they're so great and they're one of the best collectibles and they're a way to actually make Jungle, like, more rare and they're the best Jungle cards, and a lot of people push that narrative. I could see that. I could see those blowing up in price. I could also see those just kind of staying where they are and just not being people's favorites. So, but you're right. It's not a supply issue. It's a demand issue with those cards. Max says, in 2013, EX Series boxes were mostly worth $300 to $800 each. Since then, they have gone up 25 times. Do you think it's possible for them to retrace back to 2013 prices? I don't. I don't think it's possible in any world that those boxes ever get to $300 to $800, because you'll just have one millionaire buy every single one, and out of pure just nostalgia and wanting all of the product. So a lot of, when we ask these like doomsday scenario questions, it's all about market cap. And the baseline is this question, guys, and this is what you should ask yourselves and is important. If you could never sell your cards, and how much would you pay for them? If the answer is 0, then they could theoretically go to 0, because it's possible to get to a world where nobody else wants them, or almost no one wants them, okay? But if the answer is, I want this product because it's super rare, and I don't care if anyone ever buys it from me, if I ever make money on it, that creates a really hard collector base. These are not items that these are not items that no one cares about. These are items that people actually care about and value far more than just the money. And so that creates a base for us. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Now, do I think that they could go back to a third of their value? Absolutely. Do I think that they could go down 80 to 90% in value? Yeah, probably. That would be sort of the highest I could possibly imagine, because I think at that point you would have enough really wealthy people who that the market cap of this vintage stuff, and it's why the vintage is so much better of an investment than the modern, because the vintage if everything implodes a lot, the vintage eventually will just be bought up by the big fish, because you just don't need that much money to buy it all up. Look at me. I was on a social worker's salary, and I was able to buy up the like, I have one of the biggest collections in the world, right? And on a social worker's salary. Can you imagine if someone who had the conviction that I had in Pokemon, or loved Pokemon as much as me, realized about this stuff and had like millions of dollars to spend? They could have bought every single card, right, that ever came on the market, even just a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So if we go back to that year and a half ago, there are big people like Steve Aoki would just own every Pokemon card, I bet, because he just loves Pokemon and isn't trying to like make money. So, and he's just one public big fish. There are a lot of big fish. So that's the way to think about that sort of stuff, is who would absorb it, and absorb it at what price. Because what's going to happen if things really retrace is there's going to be a ton of panic that it's all worthless, but that will eventually get all bought up and sucked back up, and then prices will come back up. Okay. Now, $30,000 for a booster box of Unlimited, right, that's a lot of money. There are probably a lot of those booster boxes left. That's a big market cap. If there were only 3 or 4 people interested in those boxes, or 10 people or 50 people really, really interested in those boxes, which I'm not expecting there to be, but in a worst case sort of scenario, and I mean, we're interested in the prices for many thousands of dollars, not interested in the prices for $100. We're not, though. $30,000 is a lot. That's a humongous market cap for those boxes. But if we look at Modern and we think of like the market cap for Evolutions is so huge, because there are like an infinite number of those booster boxes still, and booster packs. And if you multiply each of those booster packs by whatever they're going for, I don't know, $20, $25, $30, whatever they're going for now, who knows what the market cap is, but it's probably the size of like most vintage like you could take any vintage card, any trophy card, and there's probably a larger, which shows you how ridiculous the evaluation on Evolutions is. Anyone who actually analyzes the analytics and cares about that sort of stuff, but so okay. Emma Brown says, "Hey Jake, hope you're well. Hope you're well too, Emma. Do you think the market is on a downtrend? It seems the bubble has popped. What are your goals for the next 1 to 3 years?" So, I see some areas that feel like they're a little bit on the downtrend, but I don't feel like the market's on a crazy downtrend. I think Modern maybe a little more than Vintage right now, but it depends what you look at. Is on a bit of a downtrend, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think, first of all, a lot of people are going to get bored and just burned out because they've just been doing it. Once you do this for about 6-7 months, a lot of people spending so much money and being so intense, and because so much of the hobby is new, the advantage of being one of these, like an older collector like me, is I know what it's like a year into the hobby, a year and a half into the hobby, 2 years, and although it's really fun and engaging, you can get bored of the same sort of thing, and you want to move on, you want to buy other things, you want to spread out a little. So, I think that if you have 90% of people basically obsessed with Modern for 7 months, or obsessed with just like a few sets or a few Charizards, like how many shiny Charizards can you buy before you're like, I'm bored of a Modern Charizard and I want other Pokemon, I want other eras, I want Vintage, I want Japanese, or you just leave the hobby and do something else, right? So for some people, they may never get bored of that, but I think the majority do. Just chasing the Charizard over and over. My goals for the next 1 to 3 years, I'm selling some. I do get people reaching out to me, offering on items in my collection, and I turn most of those offers down, or because at this point, most of my collection I feel pretty good about sitting on, and I think that most of it will either retain value or sort of go ups over time, as long as I wait sort of long enough. That's my hope. Could absolutely be wrong, and this might be the highest I could ever get for some of these items, and I understand that risk, and I'm willing to take it. But at the same time, when I do get good offers on things, I am taking money off the table. I'm putting money into Dragon Ball Z. I'm taking money from Pokemon. I'm putting it back into the stock market, back into other areas of my life, keeping some in cash, that sort of stuff. But the vast majority of my collection, and I'm actually going to do some collection videos soon. Hopefully this week I'm going to start doing that again, where I start going through a lot of my collection with you guys. I know I've been saying that for a while, but and you guys will see that I still have a lot of cards and the vast majority of my PSA cards, but yeah, I've been selling a little bit, and I'm gonna look to probably continue to sell until I feel like prices are far too low, and then I will probably become a buyer again, and I'll probably rinse and repeat that until I either don't like Pokemon anymore, get bored of it, and then maybe I would look to sell a large portion of my collection or gift some of my collection or whatever. But I don't imagine that happening anytime soon, because I still really enjoy it, and I think too when I have kids it'll be a whole new experience of doing some of these childhood hobbies with them. Benjamin Merch says, so I guess sorry Emma, just to I guess finish. So my goal is to complete or get as far as I can on this DBZ collection, although it's getting so insanely expensive, and I honestly am overpaying for things right now, which I hate to do, but I'm doing it just as a collector who wants to get certain items that just don't exist in the world or seem to like barely exist in the world. So I wanna complete that. I'd like to complete my binders, my Pokemon binders, and go back and finish those. And I want to fill in there's certain cards I'm missing from each of my sets. Just kind of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cards from different sets in PSA sets that I'm working on that I will be kind of plugging away at, and then selling the doubles and triples and whatnot. Okay. Benjamin Mert says, just purchased a raw first edition Pichu. I think it has a legitimate chance at a 10. I'll be realistic and assume a 9, though. Should I express PSA it? $12,000 would be life-changing money for me. So I try to be really careful with giving like such huge financial advice, right? Because this is that's such a huge life decision, Benjamin. So I feel really anxious saying what you should do. I think the things to think about are the multiple that's selling at. Because I think part of what you're asking is, should I express it and then sell it right away? You know, because if you're not going to sell it right away, then there isn't necessarily such a rush, right? But if you are going to look to sell it and you believe the market is going to correct, then you should sell it. No one can time the market. I can't time the market. You can't time the market. No one knows if the market is going to maybe pick back up. I don't see any signs of that necessarily, that it's going to like all of a sudden rush back up. I think the hopeful part of me is more like we're going to have maybe a calming period where we're not going to see huge crashes, but we're going to see just people kind of... I'd like to see less cards being sold, less cards coming up on the market. I think that it worries me that every card that seems to be bought just comes back on the market at just a higher price, and I just still feel like there's so much people trying to make money. And that worries me that until that gets less, we're going to see a retrace from prices, because eventually there's just going to be not enough new people or new collectors to keep buying that stuff to put it in their collection and hold. And more people just putting those cards on the market. Eventually people are going to stop paying those prices, and then you're going to see them trying to undercut each other, which is going to drive the prices down. So I think we could see that. Again, rarity is your friend. That's far less likely going to happen with your rare items. Yeah. But in terms of what you should do specifically with that, you should definitely get that card graded. That much I can tell you. I think that you have to do the math on it. So I think the difference between a 9 and a 10 is obviously going to be huge on that card. I think the 9 is selling for quite a good amount too. That even at a 9, you might decide that it's worth paying the fee for the quickest service. But yeah, it's sort of a personal decision. But congratulations on having a card that does have a legitimate chance at a 10. I do think that you should assume a 9, because they just even if they should get 10s, they don't give 10s to those cards because I don't know, they just keep those pops so low. There literally has to be 0 print line, 0 centering issue, 0 whitening at all. I feel like on those for the most part. So best of luck, Benjamin. I really hope that comes back at 10, and I really hope that you get that life-changing money, because that would be amazing. All right. But I wouldn't be comfortable telling you, exactly what to do, just because it's such a big life decision. People talking about how many slabs are going to come back and that it's going to be crazy. Pikachu saying that his sales were actually higher in January, and last month were very high, but this month has been slower so far. I think some of the FOMO also might leave the market, which would be a good thing. We'll see if prices can sustain themselves without that FOMO, though. Let's see what else we got here. Pokegeek Dom says, do you think the cyclical nature of new releases of Modern, value-wise, is something that looks to continue? On release, everything is expensive, and within weeks, things trail down until printing. Yeah, I mean, I think that should be the normal cycle, so... Oh, sorry, your question continued. Has stopped and the climb begins, and do you think specialty sets will be more resistant to drawdowns than traditional sets? So, yeah, I think the Japanese sets are generally more do better in terms of resisting that retrace. I think that sometimes when the English set comes out, and this is the Japanese specialty sets, guys. Sometimes when the English set comes out, the Japanese set does come down a little bit because the English version has come out. But overall, across time, those Japanese sets tend to do well because there just is so little supply. Now, I think that they're way overpriced, the Japanese sets, to be completely honest with you. But the reason that they do well is because they're cool-looking boxes, they're small, they're a good piece to put up. There just aren't that many of them. And there are people who just love collecting the specialty Japanese boxes, which is, I think, a huge part of it. And then there just aren't that many of them. So there is that demand. It's the reality, at least for now. Oh, sorry, I missed a question. Pokedynamics says, any thoughts on the scratch-off Tommy Pocket Monster cards and what the general fear for these are within the community? Not any specific thoughts on it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know how people think about those. There's so many options, I don't hear people talking about them too much. Lucas Collectible says that they hate the Meiji cards. Okay. Swami says, why do you hate them? That seems strong. And Blue Clue says, hate is a strong word. For me, the artwork is unoriginal. And comparison to Japanese Topps type cards. I could see that. Some interesting debates. Stephen Kassoon says, whatever happened to the collector's Charizard? They're still around. The thing about the collector's Charizard is that it's not an official. It's not considered an official Pokemon card with an official Pokemon stamp. So, because of something that happened, some miscommunication, we could say, that happened with that card. That card was released or given out, we should say, at the collector event in Hartford, Connecticut, a couple of years ago, for those who don't know. Cool card, but yeah, if that card was legit, it would be I think a lot more expensive. It could, if it could get graded, legit as in it could get graded and it was acknowledged by the company. Vu Min Dang says, your conversation with Speed is so fascinating as your approaches to risk and rarity were so different. Really pushed me to think more critically and assess different views. Fantastic. That is the ideal. Do not think like me. Do not think like Speed. Think like yourself and figure out, but think critically and challenge yourself. So if you have strong negative reactions to my viewpoints, I would push you to push past that and think very critically about what I'm saying. And then if you don't agree, hopefully arriving at that disagreement in sort of a peaceful way. Like when I watch Speed and I think he's saying things that I very strongly disagree with, it doesn't upset me at all that he believes those things. In fact, I really respect him for having his own opinions and respect him for standing up for his opinions. I think that people who share their opinions ought to be commended. I think far too many people don't share opinions because they're afraid. They try to sort of be vanilla all the time and have everyone sort of like them, and they don't want to offend anyone ever, which I think there's certainly something ethical about that and certainly value behind that in the world, don't get me wrong. But I think that there's also a lot that's missed out. A lot of learning and potential growth and actual intimacy and communication is missed out when you're not showing other people what you think and they're not showing you what they think. Jonathan Peterson says, hey Jake, you talk a lot about the Neo sets. What's your favorite non-holos from the sets? Favorite non-holos. I like some of the babies, just because they were the first ever baby Pokemon cards. I think those are kind of cool. In terms of the art, though, I think some of the rares are really cool. Like I think like the Lugia, the non-holo, just the regular rare is cool. The Ho-Oh regular rare, I really like that card, the way that looks. In terms of the commons and uncommons, honestly, there's so many good arts. I'm having trouble like picturing ones that I think like really stand out. But everyone that I'm like thinking of in my head's like cool looking, but not like necessarily worthy of like that's my favorite. I think a lot of it is just I really like all those Pokemon and I feel really connected to Gen 2 also, not just Gen 1. Because I remember when I played those games for the first time, it was so exciting that they came out with like a new generation of Pokemon, and I remember just learning about the new generation and getting really excited. At that time, I was long out of the card game, but I still played the video games. I actually played those games on emulators online, and so I because I never collected those cards as a kid, but I was connected to the Pokemon, it just made me want those cards even more. VFREPE says, I asked about the Panini DBZ cards on your video the other day. Any insight on the price spikes that have been happening? I did research and bought in really cheap. Keep holding, sell, not sure. Yeah, so there is a ton of that product out there left. I know, I won't say who, but I know of some really big purchases of that product. There are still pallets of those things around. There were some of these big places were trying to liquidate it about a year and a half ago for like crazy cheap prices. Like it was like 25 cents a booster pack, even less, like 10 cents to 20 cents a booster pack. That's like trying to just liquidate the product and get rid of it. Because although demand was really high when those were first released and they were selling really well, all of a sudden like demand just fell off a cliff and they stopped making them. They stopped printing them. So I think things are very different this time around. I think you have a lot more collectors, whereas before I think it was a lot more players. I think Dragon Ball Z card collecting in general, I am bullish on. I think DBS is people are really enjoying it, and prices like continue to go up, and that continues to be really strong and do well, and people really love that. I think that naturally trickles down and should trickle down to some of these earlier card options. The problem with Panini is that their reprints, Panini's mostly reprints of the scorecards. And that's why I love the scorecards so much, and the original scorecards. And the scorecards are much, much rarer, and they have ultra rares that look to me so much cooler than the ultra rares in Panini. I think the ultra rares in Panini are a little weak. So for me, Panini is extremely fun to open and an extremely great, less expensive option in terms of what I really view as like long-term investable, and what I think is like, I think these DBS score items are historic Dragon Ball Z memorabilia. Like I feel like I'm holding an important piece of like Dragon Ball history with these. With the Panini, I don't feel that, as they're reprints, and they're just from like 2017, 2018, whereas the scores from the same era, right, of Pokemon. And then the art box cards I really like, you guys know that, and I really like the some of the prisms, some of the older prisms too. So eventually I'll start to show some of those on the channel. But those are my feelings on the Panini. So in terms of selling into the uptrend, I don't know. What we've seen in modern Pokemon, there's so much modern Pokemon printed, and yet modern Pokemon has skyrocketed. So does it surprise me that a lot of people are buying up the Panini product and enough people are hoarding it and buying it all up that it's all disappearing and the prices are going up? No, it doesn't surprise me. I do have sealed Panini product that I bought for nothing, and I kept some of it sealed because, one, I just wanted every box for my collection, but two, because I did see some potential in it going up. But if those boxes ever got to like $400 to $500, I would be very surprised. But again, I'm shocked that Evolutions is at 1,000. So demand, guys, demand can really move things that have never moved, and that things that basically were dead and that there was basically almost no market for. It can create a whole new market for it, just like a set like Evolutions that didn't move for many years and retraced a little even at times. People couldn't even sell it for people were selling it for under what they bought it for and taking losses on it. When you listen to these people and I see these streamers hype up Evolutions and hype up these other sets, just remember, like, the history, like a year and a half ago, people couldn't sell it and were selling it for under and couldn't get rid. Now, do I think it's going to go back to that? Do I think it's, there are good things about Evolutions, blah, 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 but they don't tell you the truth. They don't tell you the full story. Okay, just be careful. You understand the risk, understand both sides of the argument, understand what's happening and what built the price to where it is. Okay? That's the key. Okay, Mighty Sponge says, how come the only TCG I see on shelves is MTG? No Pokemon, no DBS, no Yu-Gi-Oh, no sports. Is MTG dying? Less desirable, more produced, not as collectible. Yeah, it's not doing well, from what I'm hearing. So I'm not a Magic the Gathering expert, but some people that I know who know a lot about Magic, a real lot, know that it's struggling. I think that's part of why they're doing these partnerships, we could call them, with other IPs, where they're going to release these themed sets that are going to be connected with these popular IPs as a way to, I think, bring more people into the market. And I think that although a lot of the Magic players and Magic people think it's like cliche and hokey and don't like it, I do think that it could actually help bring more people into the market, particularly younger people and kids who I think may not have any connection with those cards and prefer the IPs where there are stories to these characters and a lot of, when you look at these Dragon Ball Z cards and Dragon Ball Z characters, it's not just a cool looking card, but it's a scene from the anime that you grew up with as a kid, so it hits you, Same with the Pokemon. You remember playing them in the games. You remember seeing them in the anime. So I think that's what Magic really suffers from. It's not having this world, this immersive world for kids as much as these other IPs. And so connecting with these IPs that do have those immersive worlds may help that brand. Derek Pierre-Louis says, I have the same question. Big fan of Gen 2 starters, but I'm worried there are a lot sitting at PSA because no one was grading them before. Yeah, there are a lot, for sure. 100%. And they're not hard to grade. Nearly as hard, right, as the hollows. So be careful. Genius Graphics says, I wouldn't say other TCGs need to be extremely old to be collectible. I think it needs a popular franchise behind it, but doesn't necessarily need to be 15 plus years old to be a collectible. Yeah, I don't think it's about need. I think it's about adding value. I think when something is old, two things. One, price history is very important. So when you have a lot of people buying an item for many years at very high prices, that is going to create a lot more stability and confidence in that market. So when you have brand new markets like Dragon Ball Super, for example, that's really hot and people love it, there's going to be a lot more fear, hesitancy to pay higher and higher prices because it just hasn't been around that long. So there's that part of age that matters. And then the other part of age that matters is literally holding older items generally equates to some value for people. Now, it may not for you and it may not for everyone, but I think overall, understanding that, wow, this is an item that is 30, 40 years old and is still in gem mint condition, and it's amazing that it survived all these years, and that really adds that premium to that grading of, wow, I wonder how many are left in the world that survived after 20 to 30 years in this graded condition, versus brand new cards, which are coming fresh out of pack and everyone's keeping gem mint. There isn't that allure to them, particularly with that grading process. So, but everyone's going to be different, and it's definitely not a question of need, and it's all a question of what do we mean by popular. And expensive. Modern things are become so. Pokemon was once all these things that are very collectible now were once modern, and they were initially collectible. So generally, so these things can definitely be cyclical. But generally, it's later on that they really see the exponential growth, and the vintage stuff is the stuff that does. Mighty Sponge says to Swami, so MTG is made more for playing than for collecting. Yeah, particularly the modern stuff still. I think that there are more people now that are collecting than maybe there were before, but that also could be wrong. Just because I think that there's kind of a new generation of collectors in all of these spaces right now. I think people really like collecting. But yeah, with the vintage stuff, there are definitely people who love collecting and hoarding, like Rudy from Alpha Investments, just massive amount of the vintage product and grading the vintage product. But generally, the modern cards are not graded. They do grade some, but they're not graded and collected like Pokemon is, where it's the vast majority is all collection these days. Gustavo says, glad to be here with you again. Jake, two questions. What did you recommend for people in other countries that has no option to grade their cards? And your thoughts on non-English card value? Thank you a lot. Yeah, so so if you are in a country that has like a middleman service that does grade with PSA or one of the major grading companies, I would suggest that. If you for some reason can't do that or there's no option, I'm not really sure what to recommend for you. I know that there are new grading companies opening up in different countries all over the world, and I think if these hobbies really do sustain value over the next 20 to 30 to 40 years, you may see some of these grading companies become more reputable and hold some value. So in the short term, I'm not sure. I think I would just hold my cards. Maybe one day you'll take a trip and you'll fly them to PSA and get them graded, your most expensive ones. I think that it's a real disadvantage of trying to compete in this market financially, or just trying to build your collection for an affordable amount, being outside the US where there might be more taxes and issues there, or just outside the US where there just isn't the same amount of product, and the difficulty to find this stuff's just much harder, and then the difficulty to grade is much harder. So it's tough. Unfortunately, I have no solutions. It's kind of is what it is. In terms of my thoughts on non-English card value, I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna shape up over time. I'm asked that a decent amount, and I'm just not sure. We'll just have to watch together. It may close in value. It may the non-English cards may become less valuable. They may become more valuable. I'm not sure. I know that's not really useful or helpful, but it's the honest truth. I don't know. Pikachu says, proverb, glad I'm not the only one opening that set. I thought I was responsible for the price bump. Let's see. Hey E, hope you're doing well. Jake just got here. Thanks for joining us. So I'm gonna take 6 more minutes of questions, and then for the last 30 minutes, I'm gonna jump to the bottom of the chat, and we can hang out for a bit. All right. Is it good to invest in Team Milk Toast says, is it good to invest in Team Rocket holo cards? So unfortunately on this channel, I give complicated answers to everything. So I can't just tell you, is it good or is it not good? It's good compared to certain things. It's not good compared to others. So the good things about Rocket is that it's an extremely popular set. It's a beloved set. It was the first dark cards ever in the hobby. It has a lot of people's favorite Pokemon and most expensive Pokemon and the biggest chase, Pokemon in the hobby. The Dragonite card, the Blastoise card, and of course the Charizard card are all extremely valuable. I think the Dark Gyarados is really cool too. I think the Hypno card's really undervalued in terms of the coolness of the art. I just think that card's awesome. So, and I always liked Hypno. I always thought Hypno was a better Pokemon than other people thought, but that's a whole nother thing. So there's a lot of cool stuff about it. The issues with Rocket is that it was a very heavily printed set within Vintage, but not compared to Modern in terms of the amount of mint product left. Now, in terms of how much was printed of Rocket initially versus how much was printed of the Modern sets today, I don't know. But in terms of the amount of mint cards that are left in the world, there are going to be more of these Modern cards than there are of Rocket. But so I think that Rocket's a great set. I think it's if you like Rocket, it's certainly worth collecting, but it's not a set that I would put all my money in as an investment, as the best Vintage set to invest in, that sort of thing. Ernesto Alvarez says, you take the channel way too serious, man. Have fun. We don't judge, and it's not that serious. It's Pokemon. So I think that it is, so I view it as pretty serious. I chill out on other people's channels, and I'm not doing this because I think it is really serious, because I do think that everything I say could potentially, someone could be listening to it and making huge financial life decisions. And these cards are worth lots and lots of money. And so I think for people who have lots of these cards or are investing a lot of money or are investing a large portion of their capital in something, I take that responsibility very seriously. It's part of why I'm so intense and serious on the channel. So it's definitely that's the vibe of the channel, versus what I'm like when I'm hanging out with my friends, where don't take anything that seriously and I just joke around and shoot the shit, that sort of thing. So that's this channel. Maybe sometime in the future we'll change the channel and it'll just be more chilling and hanging out. But I'd rather just do that in other people's channels. I think the best place to do that is the card opening channels, because who wants to it'd be better if you were hanging out with me and we were just talking about life, if I was opening packs and you were seeing the cool packs. I think the only way that this becomes worthwhile, just seeing my ugly mug here, is to try and be very serious and intense and intentional and give you guys as much insight for free as I possibly can. Pikachu says, Jake, have you read 12 Rules for Life by Jordon Peterson? No, I have not. Yeah, my feelings on Jordon Peterson, I've been asked about Jordon Peterson a few times. He's a human being, so there are things that I agree with him on, there are things I disagree with him on. I think it's very odd, people's response to him. I think some of the positive response to him is kind of interesting and intriguing, and I think some of the negative responses to him are pretty interesting and intriguing. And I just as a person watching him, believe that when he's tearing up and saying how much it means to him to help other people and care about people, I think that's sincere. I don't think he's doing that to just sell books or manipulate people. Is it possible he's pushing it a little bit to do that? It's possible. It's really impossible to know people's true intentions with that. His Maps of Meaning book I read a bit of, and I was a philosophy major and psychology major in undergrad, and so certainly interested in philosophy then, and have been interested in philosophy since. And so yeah, so I find his philosophical conversation certainly interesting. He's really smart. He's a very quick thinker. He articulates things in really like interesting ways that I think that makes me think, and I think makes other people think. So I'm a big fan of his philosophical work and just conversations, and I enjoy hearing his talks. I really liked his conversations with a lot of his conversations with Joe Rogan. I think actually really enjoyed those podcasts. I think some of his political views and some of his political ideas and how I think that he's biased, as we all are, and is arguing against people who should be argued against, but he's like takes it too far sometimes, because I think that certainly the political correctness and the shouting people down and the not listening to people and not being respectful and simplifying everyone's viewpoints and all the attacks that he received, right, for stupid things and some of those interviews that he sat through that were ridiculous, where the interviewer treated him just like so terribly and just asked ridiculous questions and like completely took him out of context. I'm like very on board with him and people who like him on all that sort of stuff, but I also think that he like gets a little bit extreme sometimes in his thoughts, as I do. I get too extreme. I get too negative sometimes and critical of others and greed, and so like everyone does that. So and I imagine he would acknowledge that. I think if he acknowledged that more, it might be better. I think that there's so much pressure on him to be right about everything, because I think so many people unfortunately view him as like a bit of a cult leader or guru, and I don't think some of that's I think on him, but I think that when you don't tell your audience a lot that you don't have the answers, or you're not really sure, or you could be wrong, it's a difficult thing to do, because when you tell people that, you lose some of your audience and people don't buy your book as much and people don't trust you as much and don't see you as like that father authority figure that I think people see him as. I think people look at him and they want him to, they hope that he has the answer for every negative thing in their life, and they feel that sort of safety with him and comfort. And I think there's good things with that. I think there's bad things with that if it can be taken too far. So hopefully that all makes sense and gives you guys my basic perspective on him. But I overall like him and I certainly enjoy listening to him speak. I think he's very worth hearing him think, because I like that he's an external processor like me. He thinks his ideas out loud and he works through things out loud in real time. And I like listening to people I like listening to how people think. And so it's cool listening to someone so smart think out loud, basically. All right, so I am going to, at this point, jump down to the bottom of the chat where we'll just hang out. Team Trubich says, I went from watching Jordon Peterson lectures all day to watching Pokenomics all day. Yeah, I've watched a lot of Jordon Peterson because I found him interesting, and I also found as I was saying before, the responses to him interesting, the sort of like polarizing responses. Mason saying, hey Mason saying we don't judge. Have you seen the YouTube comment sections yet? People are judging me. People are judging me constantly. Everyone's going to have a judgment, and it's part of talking to a lot of people at once. Is you get a lot of that feedback, and as Mason can tell you, he gets lots and lots of feedback, and people tell him what they think of him all the time. Some of that's constructive and good, and other parts of it can be confusing and overwhelming and all these sorts of things. And so thinking about like the amount of feedback and the amount of judgments and opinions that someone like Jordon Peterson is under, you can only imagine, right? Pikachu says that he agrees with, I think, my take on Jordon Peterson generally. His interpretations of Jungian ideas are pretty interesting. I also see both sides of the coin. It's a pretty good read, though. Maps of Meaning is intense, laugh out. Yeah, Jordan's a very, very serious and intense guy. A lot like me when we're talking about things we really care about. I would wonder if he's exactly like me, too. Like, when I'm hanging out with, like, some of my closest friends, we just joke around for hours and say nothing at all that is serious, and it's just chill. So I would imagine he has that too, but I think we both take our responsibilities very seriously. I like resonate with him in that way, and it's like how I feel too, whether that's right or wrong. Nathan Garner says, I think Jordon Peterson will make very big descriptive facts about the world, and just leaving it there for people to have without direction, I feel is a little bit irresponsible. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he says irresponsible things. Anyone with big platforms who talks a lot about very complex ideas is going to say irresponsible things. I think that's all part of it. I think the part that I struggle with Jordon Peterson is I feel like there's this, and I have this issue too, is like this sort of like, you have to, and this is also the media's fault and just like our climate, but like you always have to be right all the time, and you have to present as strong and smart and on the ball, and everyone's always trying to get you, right? Like, and it's the same with this, like everyone's trying to get me, you know, trying for that gotcha moment is the way that it can feel. And so I think that with that, it's not healthy. Like I think what Jordon is doing isn't probably healthy for himself. You know, having all that attention, having all that spotlight, and having people view him as some sort of like expert on life. Like people I think view him as like literally their father, like an expert on all reality, and he's gonna solve all reality for them. Like tremendous responsibility. I mean, it's, you know, and as a therapist, I know a little bit about what that can feel like. You know, that type of responsibility, and he's sort of like everyone's therapist, like, or tries to be, you know, or whether he tries to be or not, I think he's been pushed there and asked to be that. It's very complicated, but it's very interesting to watch. Breaking Silver says that he loves Jordon Peterson. Yeah. I mean, I like him too in a lot of ways, and really like him, and I find him very interesting too. But it's hard, you know. I've never met him. I don't know him personally, you know. I'm very much a person who's like, who knows what someone's really like through a screen. Diego de la Cerda, hey Jake, I'd appreciate your insight onto what you would do in my position. I found my collection recently and was happy to see I had a lot of heavy hitters. Yeah, so first, then you list your heavy hitters. Shining Charizard, Lugia, Shining Kabutops, Dark Dragonite, probably 60 plus good condition hollows. None I would consider PSA 9 being conservative. Do you believe these cards will further rise in value? I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah. You're in a tough position, and you're in a position that so many people are in. So you can do one of two things. You could either grade them all quickly and flip them into the market. If you don't want to flip, I would weigh on the not grading and wait side and see what the market does in a year, 2 years. I'd like put them away back in your closet. This is literally what I would do. If you don't want to do it quick and flip and sell into the hype, which I think there's a very good argument that you should sell right now and sell into the hype. And then just kind of see where the market is and hope that the market goes up or maintains value, and or just calms down to where grading becomes maybe less expensive, and or it's just easier to grade and quicker to grade. That would be my advice. But everyone is in that difficult, you know, so many people, Diego, are in that exact same situation as you right now and feel all of the exact same confusion, and there just isn't an obvious answer because that's where we're at in the market. So E says, I don't mind his talks about philosophy and whatnot, but some of the political things he says just seems out of nowhere. Yeah, I think that, yeah, it can seem a little bit, or like just like unnecessary. But I feel like Jordan's a pretty emotional person and seems, and this is me not knowing him at all, but he seems very angry at like the way he's been attacked, very understandably. And I think when he gets really angry and upset, he like gets stuck on those people that are attacking him instead of realizing that like 90% of us are interested in what he has to say and aren't like, we don't think he needs to be perfect every minute. And I know that feeling from here too, because it's like 90% of you guys, 95% of you guys are just like, you know, oh, I'm interested to hear what Jake has to say, but like I follow my own path, and he says some things I think are smart, some things I think aren't that smart, and you know, you have that sort of relationship with me, which is sort of like a somewhat healthy relationship. I think other people are like, Jake's gonna give me the answers, the Pokemon answers, or this guy's a complete jerk and knows nothing and he's a moron, and and so I think what can happen from any sort of influencer or someone like Jordon Peterson, who's such a humongous influencer, is that you can end up catering all of your content to those loudest voices where you're constantly arguing, you're constantly trying to be everything for the people who want everything from you, and you're constantly trying to argue with or prove wrong, whereas you're actually missing like a 90% of the way your audience actually feels. And I get that feeling from him, that he's sort of in that, and then he lost his wife, obviously, and he had this drug addiction, this drug dependency addiction issue. So it's, or maybe not, I'm not sure exactly, but issues with drugs, and then some sort of like psychosis response to coming off the medication or staying on the medication too long or something awful. So, yeah. Is the OnlyFans happening anytime soon? You know it, Paul Berry. Oh my God. Nicholas Carboni says, "Hey Jake, reposting from above, could you talk more about the nostalgia factor in collecting, specifically with other Nintendo IPs?" Yeah, I think that people are underestimating. I think that there's this idea that you needed to own something as a kid to be nostalgic for the exact item, and I actually think there's some truth in that. But when I look at like a card like this, for example, some of these cards, like I get a nostalgic feeling towards them because the art is of an exact scene in the anime that I grew up with, you see? So I think that it's the same argument I made. Like, I don't need to own, like, for example, like Neo's perfect example. I didn't actually collect Neo cards as a kid, but when I collect them, it brings me nostalgia for the video game. It connects me to something else, okay? So owning something related, right, to anything in the IP can connect you to the nostalgic, can remind you of your childhood and help you connect to those nostalgic feelings, even if it isn't the exact item, but just reminds you of an item you did have as a kid. Hopefully that makes sense. So, now, as far as like that all Nintendo IPs are created equal, that is, and that's not what you're asking here, but that I don't agree with. There are clearly IPs that are more popular, that are more beloved than others. I think trying to sort that out is difficult, but one of the major ways and why I was so bullish on Pokemon a few years ago is I just saw that Pokemon was by far the biggest IP in terms of the amount of money it made off merchandising and all sorts of things, and I remembered how big the cards were as a kid, and so I kind of put two and two together, and I was like, if anything's going to blow up, it's going to be this, right, in the space. This and Mario. It was like this and Mario were sort of the two biggest things. Olive Killer 123 says, "Have you collected any of the Topps 1995 or Top Soon? I think you're trying to Top Soon 1995 or Cardass 1997 Pocket Monster cards?" I have, yeah, two of my favorite sets, Olive, excuse me. Big fan. Mitt Persad says, "Jordon Peterson's self-help stuff is great, but his political stuff is problematic. He always makes claims that have heavy implications without owning the consequences." Yeah, he definitely can say things that I think are upset people, and people have very strong opinions on both sides. I think what's hard is with a lot of these issues, it's like people have really strong opinions for very good reasons in their life and for things that they really strongly believe. And I think people can lose sight that other people out there, one, that you can be wrong about even the things you have very strong beliefs about, and two, that other people out there have strong beliefs that they really believe that are different than you, and not because they're any less of an ethical person or a caring person. In fact, often probably their deep beliefs come from very similar sort of psychological places that your beliefs come from. And I think that can be lost in those types of discussions. There's always a villain, There's always needs to be a villain he's the villain, the media is the villain, this is the villain, they're the villain. This is, it's unfortunate. Do you think there's a good amount of people using 0% 0 PCT promo credit to get into the hobby and over leveraging themselves and all the promo expires? We could see a rush to the floor. I think definitely people spending on credit is an issue. Diego de la Cerda says, do you listen or know about James Corbett from the Corbett Report? I do not. An amazing source of journalism. I'll definitely take a look. So I noticed there are about 160 people here. If everyone could take a moment, if you are enjoying the conversation in the chat, just to hit the like button and subscribe if you're not subscribed, it really helps out the channel. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Say that a couple times a video now. A long stream like this. Okay. Juliana says, Jake, what do you think about the Frosted Caribou video going around? Yeah, so I think that the issue with the Frosted Caribou video is that it is pointing out a real problem, but I kind of felt like it was sort of like pointing the blame at like a few individuals rather than her taking responsibility, rather than kind of all of us taking responsibility, and understanding that a lot of the higher prices is just because people really like Pokemon, and there's just in hot markets that's going to happen. Like it goes back to what I was saying before. I think a lot of the frustrations and struggles in Pokemon right now are not anyone's fault. They're just the reality of this crazy, weird pandemic time where people had a lot of extra money and people wanted to rediscover their childhood all at once, right? Now, you're going to have terrible people taking advantage of that, and I've been trying to call them out the whole way through my thing. So I need to be careful not to be a hypocrite there. I do think that there are people who step over the line, and I think there are times when I've probably over-criticized some or under-criticized others. I don't watch a lot of her content, so I'm not sure, like, maybe she's never talked about money, but she called people out for influencers in particular for causing a lot of the prices to spike and hyping things up, and I definitely agree with that has clearly had a large effect on the market, and I think plenty of influencers haven't really at least acknowledged that. I think whether or not that's problematic or immoral is a much more unethical, is a much more difficult topic. I think if you own cards and you are hyping them up so that you can sell them at a higher price, I think that some people will say that's fine. I think that that's pretty icky. Myself, I don't like that type of behavior. I don't think that that's a clean way to play the game. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? What did you guys think about Frosted Caribou's video? I don't know. I care about people. I mean, I care that people like aren't having as much fun, and I think that I've 6, 7, 8 months have been talking about a lot of the stuff that she talked about in that video around people, every video, like all these videos that are supposed to be entertainment really becoming like pseudo bad investor financial advice. Like that's where I have the problem. Like I think when you have a channel like mine that doesn't pretend to be anything other than it is, it pretends to talk about the financial stuff and the importance of the financial stuff and how to help people get what they want in the hobby and make good financial decisions and talk about it and have fun and think critically about it. I don't see that as problematic. I think when the whole hobby becomes that, it can be a lot less fun. So I think having entertainment channels focusing on showing off the cards and telling stories is great. I think what happened was a lot of those entertainment channels, or some of them, tried to do both. and also realized that they got more views if they like held stacks of cash and talked about prices all the time. And I think that they overinflated prices a lot. And I've said that a lot on my channel, that I think Leonhardt, PokeRev, I think a lot of these guys put prices that were too high. Twice Baked Jake, I think that I see it to this day. Every time I see a video, like, they say how much a price is going for, and it's almost always too high. It's almost always higher than it's actually going for. And it drives me crazy, and they do it because I think that it makes people feel good to see the higher price, and so their audience likes it more. I think most people here want their cards to go up in value, and they like YouTubers, and they like people putting high amounts. And I think that also they want their own cards to go up. I don't know. I don't like it. I think that, and then there are people who deliver bad news and I think are probably too negative and don't share both sides. So I don't know how I feel about it. I guess I have a lot of different feelings about it. I'm interested to see what you guys are saying. Yeah, I kind of agree with Pikachu's comment here too. Just like what's sort of the solution to this, or Robert Novak says, bad video with doom and gloom vibes, putting blame on the content creators instead, putting it on Pokemon's bad distribution, always lack of print product. Yeah, I mean, Robert, that's always where I've mostly been in my mind. Just like I don't get why people just, at least some people just like don't, like, if it's too expensive for you, collect one of these other great hobbies. But I guess some people just only love Pokemon and it's hard for them. And then the other point there, Robert, I agree with, is just like, it's frustrating that Pokemon has either intentionally did this, which is then that's awful, or they just weren't expecting this, which is probably more likely. And then I don't even think we should be mad at Pokemon, because no one could have predicted this huge increase, and nobody probably knows exactly what to do about it. Some of it's just like, when a hobby 10x's in size in a matter of 6 months or 8 years, there's going to be like pretty intense growing pains, and people are going to be angry and upset with each other. So I think that the overly casting blame and the black and white thinking, I think, is the problem. I think it was a bit too black and white. Like, I think probably if she thought more about it and reflected on it, maybe she will at some point. Maybe she'll do a follow up and say, I actually invited her. I was hoping that she'd come on the channel with me to talk about it. I didn't hear back from her, but I would love to have that conversation with her, because I think it deserves a more nuanced discussion. Mason Berry says, Boo's video is the TCG players finally taking a stance in the hobby, as this whole price situation and shortage has been nothing but negatives for players. Yeah, she didn't, that might be true, Mason, but she didn't couch it like that. Like, if she, at least I think, now maybe, I think I watched the whole video and I didn't remember her talking specifically about players. She kind of cast aspersions on everyone. I think that it's fair to say that this year's been particularly hard for players, both because the cards have become more expensive and they don't really care about collecting, they just want to play, and from that perspective of, like, they're not able to play the tournaments and play games and be out with each other and be with the community. So I totally get that. But again, I'm not sure, like, that's the collector's fault. Like, collectors are to blame for the play. You know what I mean? Like to say that the players love Pokemon more than the collectors, or imply that, is stupid to me. I mean, it's like, what? You're more important because you're a player, like, than the collectors. Like, that. I mean, that's just arbitrary. It's like, I think it's awesome that people like just playing and don't like collecting. It's completely fine with me. I think it's awesome that people just like collecting. I think I read it more, Mason, as her anger was actually just at the scalpers and how they were affecting everyone, and anger at the influencers for creating the scalper problem because they grew the demand so quickly and so fast. And I do think that if the influencers didn't do all of this stuff and didn't have all these channels and didn't make all these videos, it wouldn't have grown as much. But I'm not sure. I think in the long run, all the growth isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's more of like a growing pains. There's going to be growing pains, and I think people's lack of patience. Can be an issue. I, Let's see what other people are saying. Some people saying Shane Baxter saying that she's gatekeeping, and that, yeah, Shane doesn't like that. Camus Washington said, and I was just staring at her, or I understand the point of the video, but I had a hard time seeing that she only included herself in one part of the video as a content creator, and I was just staring at her join button to pay to be a member and probably sitting in her house that Pokemon built. Yeah, that's my feeling too. It's like when you make money and your livelihood or you're a YouTube content creator making money off of Pokemon, and you've made more money this year probably than ever because of all the hype, and like the influencers hyping a Pokemon made her a lot of money this year, right? It's like not acknowledging that, I think is not honest, or maybe she didn't think it through fully. Definitely interesting to hear all of your guys' opinions. Yeah, I mean, I respect both sides. I mean, I like the sentiment and the intention behind the video to some degree. I'm just not sure that the tone and the lack of like what do we do about it, and the lack of sort of fairness on both sides, and the lack of her taking accountability for her role in everything, and for the hypocrisy of it all, could have made it like a stronger video where people wouldn't be so on both sides of it, that sort of thing. Blue Goose Collectible says, I think people are entitled to make money through this hobby as long as they are being ethical. Yeah, you know, I think it's so weird, right, when we like throw these words out, like entitled, and I say it too, like what are we entitled to in life? You know, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's, for me personally, it's she's making money, like everyone here's like, you know, a lot of people involved in Pokemon are interested in the money and how much their collection is worth, particularly adults, but kids too. And I think it's a bit irresponsible and not maybe a nuanced enough view of it to not acknowledge some of those facts and be more, take a deeper dive into it. And I think, though, that video was cathartic for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are just really frustrated that they're priced out of things. And I think that needs to be, I think part of the problem with this whole, like, people who can't afford it anymore need to, like, level up or evolve argument, like, I find that really just, like, rude and offensive and, like, kind of F you. Because, like, when rich people who have huge collections tell people who have no collections to, like, level up and evolve and grow or change or die, like, these types of things, it's like, stop. You have enough cards already. Like, you don't need to be a jerk. Like, try to be a little empathetic. Like, even if the person is being irrational and is yelling at you and being overly critical of you when really you didn't do anything unethical, you were trying to help people too, have a little bit of sympathy for people who are struggling and don't have money for their favorite hobby, I think is very appropriate. You know, I think having empathy and sympathy for everyone is appropriate. And understanding that everyone's part of this community of sorts. So Joe Cartwright says, what YouTuber are we talking about? We're talking about the oh gosh, I forgot her name. The Caribou. Caribou's like video about the like money obsession in the hobby and who caused it and the issues around that. Frosted Caribou. All right, so we're about out of time for today, guys. We're almost at that 5 o'clock mark. Does anyone have any more last second comments before we end for today? Let's see. Looks like E has a couple questions here that we can go through. E says, do you think PSA will eventually figure out a solution to backlogs? I saw the vid you did with the NGC grader who said similar backlogs happen with modern coins, but they figured out a solution. And now turnaround rounds are good and prices haven't increased tons. Will the same happen with PSA in your opinion? Yeah, I think PSA will hire more people. I think what's tricky is knowing how long this demand is going to last. Is this sort of like the new consistent level of demand that we're going to see going forward, or is this a short-term thing? So if you're thinking from a business perspective, like if you were running PSA right now, would you want to hire and train a ton of new staff if you're only going to need the new staff for like 6 months, or if the demand is going to suddenly drop off once everyone leaves their rooms, right? Leaves their houses. So I think that clearly these all these companies starting, and the fact that CGC started and all these new companies are starting, I think people are betting that these collectible hobbies aren't going anywhere, at least for the short term. And certainly sports is unbelievably booming, all these things. So I expect that PSA will look at it that way and then fully fill out, fully hire everyone that they need for this amount of demand. And I think that they will get caught up and I think things will return to normal. So that would be my guess, E, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see what they're doing. Riley Chu says someone needed to make a video about it, to be honest. Her video wasn't perfect, but no one else was stepping up to the plate. I don't think that's fair either. I mean, I've talked a lot about those issues on this channel. I mean, I guess I'm a very small channel compared to hers. I guess she was sort of the biggest channel to talk about some of those issues. I think a lot of people have those nuanced discussions everywhere. I think I think that's also part of why people are having a negative response to it, is because she's like being hailed a little bit, I think, as some hero or something. And my feeling is sort of like, well, like, I'm glad she made that video, but listen, let me not be too harsh, because I think that's a little bit too harsh. I think I'm going to take that back. You know what? I do actually agree with you. I think overall it's a good thing because it starts the debate. I do believe she's like, she seems like she's like upset, like genuinely about it, and cares about herself and her community and people that she really plays with. I think she's really involved in the Pokemon community, and to kind of Mason's point too, just misses the way it was and misses, things being less about the money all the time and less crazy and more like you can easily pick up packs and open for cheap and play with your friends and get cards you want with your friends and that sort of thing. And I really respect that. I think the problem is whose fault is that really? And like, what is you making this video do to help with that, other than say that there's no solution and we should just hate these other people or we should blame these other people? That, I think those were the problems. But yeah, it started a good conversation, and I think you're right, Riley Chu. I think that I do feel the same way as you. I mean, I remember when I was initially watching it, I was like, I'm glad someone is talking about this. I'm glad she's attempting to talk about it or have some discussion about it. It's definitely better than just like the fake hype videos all the time. I'll tell you that much. I like it much more than the fake hype. The just constant, like, everything's amazing, everyone feels great. It's like, no, like, there are a ton of people who are super bummed and irritated, and then there are a lot of other people that are, making a fortune and are super thrilled. And I think Sneaker Talk's point here, I completely agree with, that he says, I think it just allows more of an open dialogue for this kind of stuff in the more mainstream side, which I do agree with. So I think you guys are both right. I think, Riley Chi, you make a really good point. So let's end it there for today. Thank you all so much for hanging out. It's been a great time. I love hearing your opinions. I'm learning all the time. I'm thinking out loud with you guys. I don't know exactly what I think about all this stuff. I may change my opinion week to week. It's sort of that type of thing. So I think for us all to try to be honest and respectful is the way to go. And to try to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand where other people are coming from. Okay. Vincent LG says, when Pokemon addressed the shortages, your next video had a Gengar face thumbnail talking about investing into the hype. Yeah, Jody Matamo kind of says, but she has a right to her thoughts, as we all do. And it's good to see where she stands, her community stands, and where we all stand. Take everyone's opinion and put it all together for yourself. Yeah, that's a good message to end on for today. Thank you all, and I will see everyone again next Sunday. And I'm going to have some videos for you all this week. Hopefully some collection videos, maybe